The webinar today is all trying to deal with this question of, do I need a label? Dee is from 1554 Management and has been responsible, which he set up in 1997, and has been responsible for the management and label signing of some seriously important artists, and I'm going to interrogate him in depth about all of that and see if we can get to the bottom of how that all works, and tease out some information that might be of use to the artists who will be watching this webinar back over the next few months. So thanks for joining us, Dee, and I guess we should start at the beginning, really, shouldn't we? So how did your relationship with music start? Did you start in a very musical household?
Not especially. My dad used to sing quite a lot and things, but just from a very young age, I fell in love with music. So that's how it all started.
So obviously a lot of people, when they're growing up, they love music, but how did you actually how did that change into a relationship that brought you into the business?
I ended up becoming a musician myself and played with various bands in Scotland, and that's how I ended up getting into the business, was just playing in a band and wanting to progress my career as a musician. That's how it started.
And did any of the bands that you were in, did they sign to a label at any point? I mean, did you have that relationship as an artist with a label?
Yes. One of my bands, which I'm still in, believe it or not. So we still release records. So, you know, the advantage for my artist was that I could see things from both sides, from the artist point of view, but also from a business point of view. So I think that was a strong advantage for the artist.
And tell us about that label signing. Well, first of all, tell us what band were you in when they signed to this label?
I was in a band called the Pearl Fishers. I also used to do bits and bobs of session work. And occasionally I still get to do a little bit of session work here and there. But yeah, we signed to a small German label called Marina Records. And yeah, we've had several releases on that. It's been quite fruitful, yeah.
So that's been a long-term label relationship for you then?
Very much so, very much so.
How many years would you say?
That has been around 24 years or so.
Wow, that is what I would call a successful artist label relationship. That must be breaking some records.
I'm not sure about that, but it's it's a small German label. It's a very small team, so yeah, the way they operate works for the ethos of the band. So that's what's important.
Yeah. I mean, obviously major labels have long-term relationships with artists that are, you know, mightily successful, that they absolutely won't let them go. But for indie labels, that's quite a good go, I think.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, definitely.
So did they approach you? How did all of that come about?
Well, I ended up in the band as a session musician originally. They just lost the bass player, and I got asked to do the tour. That was coming. So, but the reason I knew the band was we shared the same management. My band and the band I joined, we shared the same management, and we shared the same rehearsal space. So we became friends, and I was one of the first choices when they lost their bass player.
So they were already signed at the point where you joined. Is that the case?
Just been signed, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you know, starting out as an artist must be an advantage in all this, I would imagine. You know, that seeing things from both sides must give you an empathy as you go forward with these things. But the next step for you was BAHL Records, I believe. Tell me about that and how that came about.
That came about because I don't like sitting around, and I had this idea to start a small record label to help some local bands, that came to fruition when I wasn't going to be on the road for a few months. So decided to, with a couple of friends, start a label, and that's where it progressed. We all took bank loans out and went on our merry way to find a couple of bands to go and work with.
That is brave.
Or stupid.
Well, you know, it's yeah, it's a big leap into the unknown, isn't it? And you know, to do that on bank loans is definitely brave. How did it go? Tell me how successful it was.
Well, one of the bands I managed was a band called Aerogram, and
so you managed them rather than they were on the label?
They were on the label, and one of the band actually started the label with me as well, and it was more by accident that we decided to put them on the label. And then we also heard about another band called Biffy Clyro that were doing the rounds from Ayrshire in Scotland. So I went to see them, and after one number I was like, yeah, I want to do something with them. So we spoke to them and they were up for it, and that's how we got them for the label.
Okay, I'm going to dig down into that, because I hear stories like this. Oh yeah, we met them, we liked them, we signed them. But yeah, actually, I kind of quite like to know the mechanics of how that really happened. I mean, was that a matter of, you know, going to see them backstage, you know, buying them a drink and you know, becoming friends, or, you know, was it more official than that? Was it, you know, were lawyers immediately involved, or how did it go? How did it really happen?
It was as simple as went to the gig. My friend Campbell had done the sound for them a couple of times, so he'd met them before, and it was just a simple case of wanting to talk to them after a show. That was it. And you know, when I've been in that position where sort of A&R and things want to talk to you after shows, but we were a small label. We weren't hiding that fact. We were just somebody just wanting to help out, nothing else. So we didn't have any bigger ulterior motives or anything. You know, no sweet talk. It was just, we think you're a great band. We'd love to put out a single.
Do you think the fact that you already knew somebody in their team you know, helped with the sort of trust side of this?
Music and music business is all about networking. So, you know, relationships start in the oddest of places sometimes. I think it was a small advantage, but not a huge advantage at that point of time.
Because I think that, you know, there is, artists do sort of worry about signing to labels sometimes. They're kind of concerned about what it will mean. So that's why I ask about this sort of trust issue, that they knew somebody that you knew, and they, you know, you liked each other, and therefore they were getting a kind of recommendation. As you said, the networking is very important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess for artists looking for labels, that, you know, that to be constantly networking without really thinking about where it'll lead is probably a good thing to keep on doing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, like, it's imperative being a musician, and you know, if you want to make this your career, you need to network. You know, that's what I did when I was a musician, and you know, that's how I started out. And you know, as I'll go into, you know, some of the background about what I did, what I managed to get for my bands, was because I knew a lot of the people that already existed in that network, you know. So I managed to get a lot of favours from friends. I always repaid them back, but I think that definitely helped open doors, you know, having that knowledge. Because I had done radio tours and things like that. You get to know producers, you know, you get to know some of the important gatekeepers in the business. So you never know who's out there. You just need to go out there and, you know, you need to go out there and discover. And that's what I used to do. If I knew there was a panel, a music panel happening, and I remotely knew somebody that was interesting to me, I'd be there. You know, I'd go down and just to hear what they had to say, just in case something resonated with what they were saying, and or you know, they gave a clue to how to open another door. But you know, I had tunnel vision. You know,
Yeah.
it was one of those things that I wasn't letting go till I got there. You know.
Yeah, I agree. I think right at the beginning, I remember doing an awful lot of MMF training sessions, you know, just being so hungry for information and to meet people and get to know people. And every time somebody told me about, you know, a label or a manager or you know, a publisher or somebody that I didn't know, I felt like, you know, it was my responsibility to go out and sort of find out who those people were.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I mean, when I started off, and I initially managed to get both the bands I ended up managing deals. I mean, one of the first people I went and got some advice from was another fellow manager, but I didn't know him. I saw him at a panel. He walked past me in the street, and I stopped him, and he was good enough to listen to me. And you know, that's what you find, is that there's a lot of good people out there as well, you know, that are willing to help, and getting advice, especially when you're new to this game, is really, really important. And advice that sometimes costs nothing. You know, you don't necessarily need to go to a lawyer or whatever. You need to go to people that you admire or you trust. You know, that can go a long way. And that's what I did initially.
Fantastic. Well, listen, going back to the story, because we love the story. If today we're looking at that question, do I need a label? So at the point where you approached Biffy Clyro as a small independent label, you know, what was their thinking around that question of, do they need a label? You know, were you the first label to ever approach them? And how did they kind of, you know, why did they think that they needed somebody to come in at that point and be their label?
Well, any band, to be honest, at that level, just entry level, having a single, something that you can, a lot of people call product, that you can market or take to market, elevates you from the rest of the pack. So when I approached Biffy back then, they were young teenagers. You know, they were really, really young. And for somebody to come up to them and offer them in retrospect, a small record deal was a big deal for them.
Now, yeah, I can imagine the excitement of the teenagers after the label manager left and they got the beer out to celebrate. Now, somewhere around this time, the management company came together, because you're very much mixing references to label and management in the same sentence. So tell me how those two things came about, and did you sort of run them parallel with each other?
Initially, I did. I had no intention of ever becoming a manager. That was not the plan. But as fate would have it, for both the acts on the label, I ended up doing more and more and more, which eventually I became their manager, because that was the title that somebody in my position needed to have to do the job that I was doing for them.
Interesting. So it's almost like the label morphed into the management company. Is that kind of what you're saying?
In a roundabout way, yeah, that's right.
So now, as in that role as manager, looking at your very talented artists sitting on your little indie label, as the manager, what was your strategy from there?
To get as much as I could for both bands, to get them up the ladder, and to do it any way in which I could, basically.
And would that potentially mean taking, you know, signing them onto other labels and losing them off your own label?
Yeah, I mean, that was just, I mean, the label, us running our own little label was just an experiment, you know, it was something I wanted to do, to say, I want to release some records, and that's what I did. But when you start managing bands, you want somebody, you want a label that can make a difference. We didn't have the resources at that point in time to make a huge difference. You know, there's got to be a sense of reality in there as well. And you as an artist have to know where you're going and what you want. That's very, very important, you know, and also how you're going to get there. You know, so when you know, the tables are turned and suddenly you're the manager, your back's against the wall to deliver, because it's a results business.
Mm.
You know, so the whole thing changes. You know, the whole project changes into something else.
So you didn't feel like you had a conflict of interest being the manager and the label, because you were gunning as the manager to just push them as far as they could possibly go?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you signed them to Baba Yaga, did you, I mean, you must have taken some ownership of copyrights and signed some form of exclusivity. Did that agreement have to come to an end before you could take them on to another label?
I'm trying to remember now, it was such a long time. We signed something very, very simple. You know, it was, like I said, we weren't in it to try and get rich or anything. We just wanted to release records at that point in time. So,
and preferably cover the cost of that bank loan, I would imagine.
Yes, well.
So okay, so fortunately there was no conflict of interest and you just wanted to push them forward. So what came next? I mean, thinking of Biffy in particular, because I think this is quite an interesting journey that will help us demonstrate this question of, do I need a label?
Well, there was a lot of hard work thereafter. We worked very, very hard as a team to try and get noticed, to try and, you know, to people know who the band were. I managed to get many labels to come and see them at various gigs, but it didn't connect for one reason or another. It just didn't happen. And at that point of time, in the late 90s and early 2000, rock wasn't quite in at that point of time. Labels didn't seem to be signing rock or the kind of rock Biffy were doing. So, you know, heads were down at times, but we persevered and persevered. And the next thing that was significant that happened was we signed to a college label called Electric Honey Records. Snow Patrol, Belle and Sebastian had signed to them previously, but that was a small breakthrough, because suddenly that experience gave us a platform, and it also gave us a small budget to go and record properly. So had they put out their debut album at this point, or was that no? This was a small EP, and even to this day, I mean, like, there's not many of them about, but exchange hands on the internet for about £300 sometimes.
Really? Brilliant. So that was on Electric Honey.
Yeah.
And was it the only release that they did on that label, or did they?
Yes, that was the only release, but because we had a very good product, it gave me something else to send out to the record labels.
And when you signed them to Electric Honey, was that decision based on the fact that you knew that Electric Honey was already signing artists that had gone on to do very well, and you thought that the connection with that label was going to help you push the band further? Was that the basis of the decision?
Pretty much so, yes. And you know, anybody offering a young band a budget to go and record and get promoted with some marketing is definitely a step up.
Yeah.
You know? And it proved to be very crucial in the journey of Biffy Clyro.
And were there offers elsewhere coming at that time, or was it just that label? I mean, you said that you'd had some hard times and some...
There was a couple of small things, but nothing significant that I thought was worth doing at that point in time.
But it was still definitely a sort of a judgment that that label had something to offer the artists that could push them forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So they put out an EP on Electric Honey. What happened next?
Well, the night that we launched the EP, we managed to get played on Radio 1 through a couple of DJs that I knew at that time in Scotland, and they were covering for Steve Lamacq or something.
Yeah.
And we managed to get played on Radio 1. That was our first play, and which was very significant given it was the launch of a record. But having that product meant I could send something that was very credible to record companies, and that's what I did, was send to labels that I thought were appropriate for us at that point in time.
So your strategy with Electric Honey was very much about, they were a kind of stepping stone, yeah, on the way to somewhere else. Did Electric Honey understand that too? Yeah,
but the nature of the deal signifies that as well. You know, that they're a credible little college label. It was bigger than what the label that we had, but it still wasn't in the world that we wanted to exist.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you sent out this EP, which fortunately you now had as a result of Electric Honey. So proving that was why you needed that label. Yeah. What happened next?
Thereafter, I set up a showcase gig in London, the Camden Barfly, as it was then.
Oh, I remember it well.
And invited various record labels to come down, and some did, but one in particular did, which were Beggars Banquet Records, and they got in touch as well, saying that they really loved the EP, and after seeing the band, they wanted to sign us. So,
okay. And at that point, how much did you know about Beggars Banquet?
Well, I knew certain iconic bands had been on that label, The Cult, for example, and they had other labels within the structure, 4AD, you know, Cocktail Twins, you name it, they've gotten, you know, really, really iconic sort of indie rock bands, you know. So I knew a little bit, yeah.
And did you know any of the characters within Beggars Banquet? You know, the people behind the scenes that.
No, I didn't know anybody.
Okay.
No.
So, but you already had this strategy where you knew you were kind of moving up labels with this band, and that was kind of, I suppose, that decision of do I need this label now, is that, you know, it was a step up from where you were with Electric Honey as a college label, and they had more to offer. Certainly financially, they clearly had more to offer, and in terms of reputation, they had more to offer. But how did you know that they would do the job, you know, before you signed on the dotted line?
Well, you look at the artists that they have on their roster, you know. You have various meetings with the people that want to sign you. That's very, very important, because your journey needs to be in line with what they see for you as well. You know, that's very, very important. So when you go out looking for a label, you know, if you're a young artist, maybe look at some of your favourite bands and see where your favourite bands are. You know, that definitely helps. But you know, sometimes you're also going on trust. You know, about what they say they're going to do, what's going to happen at record labels. So, but my intuition was right. I thought, I still do. Stand by it. You know, so I think we made the right decision. Yeah.
So the difference, you're moving up the label structure now. You're moving to a sort of a big indie label with a lot of history and clearly a lot of expertise to get all of those artists on there in terms of A&R, but also in terms of marketing and financial input, etc. So what were you hoping for Beggars? When you signed with Beggars Banquet, you must have had targets that you were looking for them to achieve.
Well, one of the first things was to try and get a producer on board. I always felt the band needed a little bit of direction. And, you know, Beggars Banquet provided that. They also gave us a platform to go out and tour a lot. And, you know, without that backing, you know, and we played everywhere, every small venue, every dingy venue, you name it, we played it. But we also, you know, we built up quite a following from word of mouth to, you know, touring, because essentially that's what that apart from the songs, that was another major strength, which was touring, being a great live band.
So was there a sense that the timing had to be right? You had to get to that point where there was a buzz with the audience at the point that you signed with this bigger label. Was timing important in all of this? Timing,
yes, it was important, but it still took a long time to get to, you know, eventually to get to where we wanted to be. There was still lots and lots of hard work to do. And dare I say it, we released 3 albums in 3 years. You know, that's how prolific the band were as well. So we were never off the road. You know, any tour that we could get us onto, you know, it was imperative in the journey of Biffy Clyro.
So you said that you'd played every venue going, you'd been out on the road earning your dues. So what kind of doors did Beggars open to you on the touring circuit then? Was it primarily about support slots?
Some support slots, but obviously headline slots as well, because you've got to stand on your own 2 feet eventually. And having, you know, been able to tour gave us that was our calling card, because we didn't have the biggest of marketing budgets. Radio wasn't playing us at the time very much, apart from maybe John Peel, you know, some smaller radio stations. Press weren't on board at that point of time as well. But we kept on knocking on the door. That was the thing. We wouldn't go away. We refused to go away. And did being signed to Beggars, did it allow you to grow the team in other ways as well? Yeah, very much so. You know, apart from just the UK, we had different people that were internationally based. So, you know, that was opening some doors, you know, especially when we were out there touring across Europe, States. So, yeah. And did it lead to things like publishing deals, bringing promoters on board, etc. as well? Not initially on the publishing front. That took a long time to come. But promoters, yes. You know, promoters started realizing, you know, that, you know, this was a band that meant business. And, you know, our agent at the time, who is still with the band, Steve Zapp, helped immensely as well. He was a huge part of the team. Cool. So obviously the band are not with Beggars Banquet now.
tell us what you can about what happened with regard to that relationship.
Well, we came to the third album. We did all the promo for that. But again, our ambition was to take it further. And I think there was a bit of hesitancy from the label side.
But they didn't believe that they could go up another level?
I don't know if they didn't believe it, but some of the signs were there that it was going to be difficult to move up the next rung of the ladder.
And were you sort of reading that situation in terms of the sort of budgets that they were prepared to release to you for marketing and so on?
Yeah, exactly that. You know, they've got, you know, I will always respect Beggars Banquet for what they did for the band, and they've got to operate in the structure that you know their business model is. So you know you've got to respect that. So at the end of the day, you know, if you're on the label, you've got to live by that as well. But we wanted to take it further. So.
Okay, so that puts you in a very tricky situation, because I imagine it wasn't the you know, a little bit of the casual relationship with the very first label that you signed the band to. I'm sure that there were lawyers involved when Beggars Banquet deals got signed, and you know there were copyrights that were handed over, and there were exclusivities agreed and so on. So in that situation where you're already signed to a label, but you feel that label maybe isn't quite pulling its weight, and you think that you need a bigger label than the one that you're on, how did you deal with that situation? How did you extricate yourself from that? And I know that there were some legal dealings at the time that obviously you can't share with us, but what can you tell us about it?
Well, ultimately it comes down to the ambition of the band. That's the end all and be all. If the band want to be bigger and feel they can be bigger, then you know you've got to try and, as a manager, make that happen. And you know, within our camp, we thought we could achieve a lot more. And you know, we spoke to the label, and unfortunately there was some falling out as well, because I can understand it from their point of view. We were their band, you know, they invested in us, they found us. So it wasn't the smoothest of journeys around that time.
But nevertheless, you were reading the situation, going, we need to be somewhere bigger. You know, we need to be on a bigger level. So the decision was not, you know, is that there is a need for a different label. So what was it that you were looking for in that different label, apart from just ambition?
It was somebody that wanted the band to be big, that shared the same vision as us, and were prepared to do what it took to get there.
And I guess that in some ways, as a signee of Beggars Banquet, you weren't officially on the market, so it's kind of quite hard to find labels because they're not knocking on your door, because presumably they don't think you're available. Exactly. So how do you find that label that you moved on to next?
Well, I kept in touch with a chap who was a big fan of the band from another record label, and basically he worked for Warner Brothers, and we kept in touch 6-7 years. And you know, during this time we kept on talking to the point that he introduced me to his boss, and from there we managed to work out something that took us off Beggars Banquet, and we signed to 14th Floor / Warner Brothers.
And this was Christian Tattersfield, I believe. Yeah. Now, I know Christian a little bit, and I know that he's a bit of a maverick. He's not the obvious, in the mold of a major label A&R person. Do you think that made a big difference?
I think so. I mean, like having, the other chap who was really wanting to do it made a big difference as well. And when Christian came to the table as well, yeah, it was definitely very convincing. There was others. There were others that were wanting to do the deal as well, but that's who we went with.
That's interesting. So you had a choice. You were making, some real sort of judgments about who was going to be that label that were going to deliver on what you wanted.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true.
And I'll tell you what, it certainly evidences what we said earlier about networking. If that relationship had gone on 6 or 7 years, you were already signed to, a label that you'd released 3 albums with, and yet you were still networking with that person. It was still conversations.
Thoughts. You never know. You never know where a conversation that you've had somewhere is going to go, or you think, hold on a minute, there's been quite a few things like that have happened over the years,
Okay, so now you've moved small independent to big independent to major label. You're on a major label now with Biffy. How different was it in experience from Beggars?
Everything was much bigger in a lot of terms, budgets, the people that surrounded you, the team. Yeah, it was, they meant business. They absolutely meant business. But that's something else as an artist. You've got to know where you're going or where you want to go, because, on independent labels, you get to make the music generally you want, and you don't get a lot of interference, generally speaking. Whereas when you go onto a major record label, you've got to be prepared to get A&R'd and other people having a lot of opinions about your music. So I don't think it would have been right for Biffy Clyro to have a major deal at the beginning. I don't think they'd be around today if that was the case. But it's all, gradual stepping stones that really helped learn about the business, learn how to do things, in the industry, and they were ready for the major deal.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because you do hear horror stories about people jumping into with major labels very young and not dealing with it very well.
No, because as soon as you sign to a major label, your life's not your own. Because there's a lot of demands put on you, a lot. And if you can't handle it, it'll end very, very badly.
So what happened next? How did it go? How many albums did they end up putting out with Warner's?
Well, they're still on Warner's.
Okay.
So
still putting out albums on Warner's. How many so far?
How many so far? I'll need to think.
It's clearly going well, though.
Yes, it is for the band. Yeah. Okay.
So when you look back on the history of all of that story with Biffy and what it tells you about the industry, I mean, what are sort of your conclusions about those decisions, about how you choose the right label? Do I need a label now? What can you sort of draw from that other people might be able to use?
Well, you might not end up in the label that you want. Just having, for a band, just having any sort of record deal, any label that's willing to put your music out, that's willing to invest in you, is a big deal. Yeah, we talk about, like how to choose the right label to come in for a certain kind of artist. It doesn't always work that way. A lot of luck is involved in this as well. It's not just, you you contact many labels. Not everybody is on the same wavelength as you, you know. So you soon realise that sometimes you've got to go with what you've got at that particular moment in time. So it's, you know, it's better to have something than nothing, in my opinion.
Interesting, because I guess there's with artists, there's so much fear about signing that deal and being then stuck, you know, that sometimes it's almost, it's like paralysis, you know, you can't make that decision because either way it looks like the pros and cons are sort of looking similar and you don't know what to do. But that attitude that, you know, take something that's offered and make the most of it and use it as a stepping stone onto the next thing.
At the end of the day, you know, bands want to be productive, they want to be creative, they want to go and just, you know, function as band, write songs, perform, you know, go on tour, make videos, everything that entails being in a band. But it depends. I keep going on about the band's ambition. You know, you can still get there, but having more control. You know, like you don't need to sign to a record label. There's companies that do label services these days that they act like record labels, but they take a fee for doing, you know, being in that position.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because I believe that you offer label services now. So having come through that whole process with all of those different labels and with your sort of having run a label and with your management hat on, now you're moving into that area, I believe. Tell us about that and how that's come about.
It's come about just out of necessity, to be honest. You know, the last couple of years have been tough for everybody, especially with COVID and things. And it was something I wanted to explore because I'd never done it before. So just to dip my toe into seeing how different things work. You know, you have different companies setting up these days, not just label services, but you have different companies that want to release music. You know, people are being adventurous as well. So sometimes these things can really work, you know, not just for the company releasing the music, but for the artist. And, you know, that's what it's about, whatever suits the artist. That's important.
Of course, yeah, it's finding that right fit, isn't it?
Yeah.
So with the label services side of things, I mean, does that solve any problems that you came across when you were working directly with labels from an artist's point of view? Do you think the label services is offering them something that avoids some of the issues you might have had with the labels?
One of the big things most of the time is that you still have ownership of your music. And for quite a few artists, that's really important. And, you know, that's one of the reasons that you might want to do a label services deal.
But and so they keep control of everything. They keep control of their music and ownership of their music. But are you still offering the same sort of creative and career focused offering that a label, like a major label, would offer?
It might not be in the same extent to the major label, because major labels have generally more resources to offer, but you're still getting a stab at it. You're still learning. You're still managing to function as a band, which I think is important. It just, you know, whatever way you can make music and keep going is vital, I think. You know, you don't just not one way to do something. You've got to keep trying, and whatever works for you. And then in the career of Biffy Clyro, we tried several things to try and make it there till we got there, you know. So yeah.
So do you think that label services is something that's going to become more prevalent? I mean, is this a sign of the times that we're in?
I think so. I think so. I think artists will look at label services, you know, and the people that advise artists, you know, lawyers, managers. Yeah, I definitely think so.
And I mean, what can you tell us about the sort of deals that you do with artists as a label services company? I mean, what can an artist expect that will be different?
Deals get tailored to each individual band. There's not just one deal, so to speak. It depends on how much ambition the label services have as well. You know, they have an A&R process as well, and how much they like the band's music, and to see what they can, you know, what they can think they can achieve with it as well. So it really depends on the individual band and who's signing them to the label, so to speak.
So do you think that label services is right for bands that are very much in, you know, very sort of business savvy, have got a good sense of the industry themselves, can you know, need control of their own identity, etc., and that maybe it's going to be increasingly that labels like majors and major independents are more for artists that don't have that expertise?
Definitely think label services is you know, if a band want to experience every element of, you know, most elements of being in a band and releasing music, I think, and you want to retain a lot of the control, I think that's the way to do it. It's a great place to start, I would say. You know, but it's a great place to finish as well, if that's what you want to do. You know, I keep going on about the ambition of a band. Depends on what a band want to do, how they want to operate. You know, you get bands that control everything, you know, and still manage to function within a label services kind of deal. Because you need, you know, you need distribution as well of your record, and usually these establishments have the know-how to do it as well.
So just sort of break down for us in terms of what are the actual services that label service company will do. Will they handle things like distribution?
Distribution, merchandise, sometimes A&R, artwork, merchandise for the road, some help with trying to secure tours. So it's a whole variety of things, getting, you know, trying to help with getting on playlists, which is very important these days, you know. So there's a whole variety of services that these label services can offer.
That sounds like it would take quite a big team. Have you got a lot of people working with you?
On one of the projects, it's a fair sized team. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a complicated world. I mean, when you think about the huge offices that major labels take over and fill with people working in every department, it's, you know, it is actually a lot of work to do it well, isn't it?
It is. But, you know, anything that you want to be successful at requires a lot of focus and luck. Dare I say it? You know.
Yeah. It's fascinating, you know, just looking at all of the different guises of being signed that you've kind of gone through with your own art, your own band, and then on through all the management. Are you still doing management these days?
I'm not managing Biffy Clyro anymore, but I am still managing bands. Yes.
You've got a lot on your plate, Dee.
I've had a lot on my plate. I can always do with more.
but still, it seems to me, still ambitious, still kind of curious, still kind of wanting to move forward very much with your own career and with your artists.
Absolutely. You only get one life, so you've got to make the most of it while we're here.
And with your label services company, how would you react if like has happened with Biffy and the way that they've moved label to label, a label came along and wanted to sign one of the artists that's on your label services company?
If well, I don't own the label services. We use label services for the management.
Right. Okay.
The management side of things. If a deal came from another label and it suited the band, then yeah, I definitely would look into it and see if it was appropriate for the band to make the move.
It's always that you're still back always to that question: do I need a label? Are you? You know, it's
well, that's the thing. You know, do you need a label? You know, it's in a lot of people's eyes, it'll be yes. You know, the expertise that brings, the knowledge, how to take a record and band to market. That's, you know, it's imperative you have people, if you want success, that you have people in your team that know how to do that.
yes, it is. You know, it's not that long ago that there was talk within our industry that, you know, maybe labels were over, maybe there was no need for them anymore. Artists would all be independent and own everything, and they, you know, everything would go online, and of course they could control their own career, and they didn't need to hand everything over to a label anymore. But you don't seem like you're totally convinced about that.
My experience doesn't say that at this moment in time. I don't think so. I mean, like, look how many bands on a daily basis release music on Spotify. How many bands actually get noticed and picked up? You know, so many releases, but, you know, hundreds of releases every week, but very few bands get to where they want to be. Yeah. So, you know, that's my experience.
And do you have any advice for any artists out there who maybe are being approached by labels now and really have no clue how to sort of judge whether that's the label for them, that's going to be that stepping stone that's going to take them further?
Yeah, I mean, like, if somebody's offering you a deal, you must have something. There must be something there that somebody else wants to get involved with, market, you know, try and make successful. So if you're being offered a deal, seek help. There's lots of people out there, you know, in your town, in your city, you know, or London, you know. Go and seek help from people that, you know, that you trust or you've heard of. You know, you'll be surprised that doors do open, and take advice, and hopefully it's the right advice and you sign to somebody that you want to sign to.
And are we talking going to see lawyers? Is that where you seek that advice?
Lawyers, other people in bands, people that you trust, friends in the business, really. You know, you've got to have, not just anybody. You've got to have people with a bit of knowledge that have been there and done it. That's important, I think.
So it's all about research, and it's all about networking.
Always has been, always will be.
Yeah, totally. And you operate in Glasgow, and you've stayed there, and you're still there. And there is a sort of view that, you know, maybe everything goes on in London, which obviously it clearly doesn't. But, you know, the pull to London must have been quite strong when the labels that you were dealing with were based down there.
I spent a lot of time in London over the last 20-25 years. I didn't live there, but I did spend a lot of time there. But I think I'm an example of single-mindedness to some degree, that if I can manage to stay in my own home city, others can as well. You know, if COVID has shown anything, is that people can carry on doing what they're doing, but in their own space, you know. But when I needed to be in London, I was there, you know, because that's where the industry gravitates. So.
And just sort of a final question, because we're starting to run out of time. I just wanted to ask you that COVID question, because it seems so, you know, current now. So, you know, do you think that COVID has changed anything in the landscape label going forward?
Time will only tell, to be honest. Let's see what happens. Hopefully live's coming back. One of my own bands has got a gig this Friday at a festival, I hope. So time will only tell. Let's see if, you know, streaming figures and things like that have taken a hit. A lot of artists have lost a lot of money because they've not been able to do what they do.
And presumably a lot of labels too.
Yeah, definitely. But music has still been there for sale, you know, but maybe what the thing is, they've not been able to develop the newer bands that they had in that time. But it's definitely had an effect on the whole industry, in my opinion. Yeah,
well, we're going to have to wait and see on all of that, aren't we? It's, as you say, it's going to be time that will tell. But, you know, I'm really grateful for your time, Dee, and for being so generous with the information and the history of your amazing career. And it's really a joy to talk to you, and thank you, because I'm sure that, you know, people are going to learn an awful lot from listening to this. So really, really grateful.